Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Laura Van Daken with the Ames marketing team, and I'm going to be your host during the webinar. I'd like to welcome you to Retail Survival Tactics. We're going to be discussing the challenges faced by this industry and how retailers are differentiating themselves and succeeding. So it's my pleasure today to welcome our presenter, Marcel Mauritz, our VP of Supply Chain. Marcel has a PhD in Supply Chain Network Design and Operations Research and has been working with companies in retail, logistics, and manufacturing for many, many years. He is passionate about improving decision-making and supply chain analytics and optimization, and I'm sure you're going to see some of that in today's webinar. So what we're going to cover today is why retail is a tough industry, and those of you in retail experience that every day. We're also going to cover what the successful retailers are doing and how modeling and optimization really can help with top-line growth. And something that we're really passionate about is also really sharing some examples that will inspire you and give you some ideas about how to make changes at your organization. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Marcel. Marcel, take it away.
Thank you, Laura. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Laura introduced the topics, and yes, retail is really interesting. And as you saw maybe quickly in my background, I also worked a couple of years in retail, headed up the supply chain organization of a large Dutch department store, a large retailer, and that's already more than a decade ago. And at that time, it was already challenging, and it only got more complicated. In particular with multi-channel, with dealing with many more reverse flows, and of course with more and more competition kicking in, shorter product life cycles to manage. It's complicated and it's tough out there. This is just a snapshot of photos from the industry, from news items indicating even, very, very serious, well-known names and very well-performing organizations like Walmart, who have been for decades really steady and very predictive in a high performance, still going strong, but even they are closing hundreds of stores and are needing to shift gears to stay ahead. You see a number of other games, a number of other stores like V&D department stores in Europe, in the Netherlands, who had to file bankruptcy, Target, who had to retreat from Canada, all strong names that just, struggle. And so it's really tough out there, and I fully recognize that. But on the other hand, there's also retailers that are going strong despite rough weather. An organization like Kroger, for example, is really performing well on top of things, being spot on with their promotion, products and assortment. Action, a relatively new retailer in Europe. To be honest, I don't know how good they are in analytics. I would love to know more about that, but they are spot on in finding the right niche in the market, the exact right product for a really attractive price. You just don't walk out of their stores empty-handed. It's really fun to do shopping with them. So they got that point right. An organization like Macy's, for example, is really well known of all different department stores in the US for getting the whole point of inventory management and fulfillment really right. Across all stores, all warehouses, all channels, they have full visibility of their inventory, and they are able to decide basically per order from where to source it, which also allows them to do local deliveries from a local store to a consumer who orders online, allow consumers to give products back into stores or to send them back. They basically have a virtual inventory management system across all their different outlets and warehouses, and they can deploy that on order level for any either replenishment or customer order that needs to be filled. And that shows off also in the financial performance. Another organization like Zalando don't have brick and mortar stores. It's a European chain. They have looked really well at Zappos and grown from 0 to covering 17 countries in Europe out of 4 huge warehouses in the past 5 years. And that's an amazing growth rate. And one of the things they do really well is service. Free returns from everywhere, next day delivery almost across Europe. It's amazing. And you need to set yourself apart like that in order to be successful. Let's also look at not just some snapshots from the news, but also what analysts are saying about this. And I've collected the view of 3 different analyst organizations. To start with, Supply Chain Insights started off, well, not a decade, but I guess already about 6, 7, 8 years ago by lead analyst Laura Cesiri, very respected organization. And what they are focusing on in particular is, I would say, the C-level aspects. Really what you talk about in the boardroom about being really successful. It's setting the constraints, the conditions for success. For example, in the style of leadership in your organization, reporting lines, and in particular, reporting your whole operation into one common leader, very strongly in line with that, horizontal processes, horizontal alignment along your entire value chain. About technology implementation done right first time, I would say that's almost a consequence of other successful conditions. And what she says as a 4th point, strong capabilities in supply chain planning and network design. I couldn't agree more to that, obviously, from my organization and from my background. What I would even like to add to that is in the most recent conversations I've had with retailers and organizations working very closely with retailers, is that it goes even further than that. It's design, it's planning, but it's also execution. It's on individual order level that you ideally would like to make the decision, where do I source it from? Do I source it from a store, from a warehouse? And if I source it from a store to a consumer, which is the best one to take? Because there's a difference to be you can make there. And that requires really strong execution analytics, like real-time analytics capabilities. And what helps in all that is a very clear strategy of your supply chain and a very clear and commonly shared definition of what excellence in supply chain looks like in the organization. And what we see is that if you compare two companies who have the same ambition and the same projects going on in terms of supply chain planning, analytics, execution, that the one who has these type of conditions done right, a clear governance structure, horizontal processes, and a very clear definition of what excellence looks like, that they are much more successful and reap much more benefits out of their analytics investments. So that was for Supply Chain Insights. If you then look at Gartner, I guess they don't need any introduction. You will all know them. This is what they identify as 4 things that the top 15 in their annual retail top 15, what those retailers do better or where they differentiate from other retailers. And it's partly the same as what Supply Chain Insights sees, but they focus more on the process side and process excellence. So you see the horizontal process orientation, no silos, not in your inventory, but also not in assigning particular activities to certain retail channels, being channel agnostic in your fulfillment process, in your merchandising, and in your inventory. And inventory is also what they see as the second part. Have common pools of inventory that you can allocate dynamically over the different retail channels. And then one thing a lot of retailers are getting good at right now, but it's still a tough thing to do, is to be very good in reverse logistics. Of course, if you do e-commerce, you send to consumers, you will get a lot of shipments back. And it's better that you're really good at that and that you are excellent in repurposing the products that you get back, instead of that you're still at the phase that it's considered an issue or a problem and that you hope that you don't get back too many. Well, of course you hope you don't get back too many, because then something goes wrong in your product portfolio. But well, you get the point. It's about being really good at that and turning that into a strength of your organization. And in order to do that, to be horizontally aligned, agnostic in your processes, have your inventory pooled over all your channels, and be excellent in reverse, you will have to do a lot of investment in your system. What Gartner identifies is investing in order management systems. That's absolutely true. I would like to add to that you would also have to, well, let's say, walk the extra mile, no pun intended, in applying analytics. And applying analytics, in particular, the shorter term, almost on execution level, allocation of products, of inventory to channels, setting service levels, acting upon that, setting safety stock levels, being able to do that totally in sync and in rhythm with changes in the marketplace. The third and the last analytics organization I will be looking at is the Retail Industry Leaders Association in the US, in cooperation with Auburn University. They are pretty much in line with what Gartner says, but add a couple of really interesting points to that. One is the aspect of time. In particular, on the e-commerce side, time is getting more and more a differentiator, where next day delivery used to be a bonus, and in some cases still is a bonus if you can do that, is a differentiator. The front runners are already looking for ways to do same-day delivery. And that's really a way to delight your consumers and to attract them to your organization. Space, and then the actual, the really good, making optimal use of available space, in particular in your warehouses. That's also a challenge that I must say we hear that too from our relations, but they rightfully put that also in their analysis. With a growing number of SKUs, the long tail getting longer, shorter product life cycle, the number of products that you need to manage just grows and grows and grows. It really pays dividend to be even more efficient in using the available space in your warehouse. And later on in this webinar, we'll see a really interesting example that does just that. One other thing that they mentioned, it's their point 5, it's about transport capacity, and also an interesting part, because what they notice is that like 10 years ago, parcel business to consumer carriers were really eager to win big contracts, and you could sort of squeeze them into a situation where they would either offer you a really low price or a very fast service. But with the staggering growth of business-to-consumer parcel deliveries, those carriers can be more choosy about who to work with and can have a level conversation with you now about conditions for a successful and a fair cooperation. And that forces you to really look very carefully at the way you hand over your products, the way you send information up front, the way you package them, and you can really make a difference in looking at that aspect. Well, that's the view of 3 analysts. I will now show a little bit of what AIMS as an organization, what we learned from working with our clients, and what we have to offer. I'll do that really quickly and then go to 3 wonderful examples. So we exist already for 25 years, work in the field of prescriptive analytics, or in other words, in the field of and optimization. We have a platform that companies can use to really quickly build high impact applications to support decision making. High impact, meaning you really can capture all the complexities of your decision making situation, of your decision making process, being on strategic, on tactical, or really short-term operational level. In order to do that right, in order to really benefit from the analytics, you need to capture all the aspects of your decision situation. That's actually what you can also really do well, or what you're used to doing with your satellite navigation system in your car. As soon as you have a good one, you start trusting on it. You just end the situation, the location where you want to go to, choose maybe amongst the 1, 2, 3 options that it offers, and then you trust it. You don't check it every time anymore because you know it's right. And the reason it's right is because all the relevant data, all the data relevant to that route planning problem is captured into your planning system. And that's exactly what you need with like a production planning system, or safety stock optimization system, or a fulfillment planning system, or an inventory management system. If you want to trust on it on a daily basis, hourly basis, transactional basis, you must be sure that all aspects, all intricacies of your particular operation are in there. And that's what a modeling environment, a modeling technology can do much, much better than any standard off-the-shelf solution. And that's what many of our clients have experienced. It's a return on investment that, because of the optimization that's in there, you always get the best set of actions suggested by the system. Whatever, I would almost say, whatever complexity you throw at it, and that has the effect that you always return your project investment within 1 to 4 months. The longest I've seen is 6 months, but typically it's half of that or even shorter. That's how high the impact of an implementation is. And that's not just analysts using it. I would almost say it's not analysts using it. It's really planners, people on the work floor, people who have to make operational decisions on an hourly or daily basis. They benefit most, and they bring the highest impact to your organization. And it allows you to really differentiate yourself from the competition, to really do things your way. Maybe a little bit on a side note, it was just yesterday that I read an article in a European magazine where they interviewed 4 or 5 different global sales and operations planning managers of all really respected companies. And they were talking about how to implement that and the change management around it and the principles behind it. And of course, the conversation came also on technology. 4 of them, well, used 1 or 2 standard well-known brands of technology, of standard technology. And one of them, it was the global S&OP manager of Shell, huge oil company. They said, well, we build our S&OP system ourselves because we believe that we can achieve a competitive advantage by doing that totally ourselves. We're not going to share the details of how we do that, but it's about managing our business and taking full advantage of all the supply aspects and all the demand aspects of our business and finding the best way forward in that. And that was for me like, hey, wow, even a process that is sometimes positioned as standard, as common as sales and operations planning, there you can make a real competitive difference if you model all aspects of your business in that. So that's about innovation, differentiation. And well, I said already, you can implement really quickly. So the agility and speed is really high, benefits come quick. And you can apply it because of the flexibility of a modeling environment. You can apply it throughout your organization. It's not restricted to inventory management, not restricted to demand planning or fulfillment or customer service. There's organizations who use it for pricing. Every week for every SKU that they deliver anywhere in any country in the world, they determine what they consider to be the best manufacturer suggested retail price. given competitor price levels, given the phase in the product life cycle of the product with them or with others, given commercial actions that they are doing. You can use it for that as well. In sourcing, we haven't spoken about sourcing. That's where you can make a huge difference as well. You can use AIMS technology, and that's the last I say about AIMS, in any of these areas. It's agnostic basically into where you use it. What I will explain now is 3 cases, back to retail, of 3 clients of us. As I just said, it's sometimes really competitively differentiating what companies are doing with their modeling and optimization technology, and that prevents me from sharing the really I would almost say juicy details of some of these models and applications. I will sketch what the problem is that they are using, roughly the way they are solving it, but well, you will get that confidentiality is around some of these models. But it's about a US retailer who is focusing on maximizing the effectiveness and the impact of their promotional budget, and it actually even goes further than their promotional budget. It's a European retailer that goes very far in like treating their total inventory as a virtual inventory and relocating it not only between warehouse and store or store and consumer, but also between stores. That's a really nice concept that they have developed. And an Asian retailer, as I said earlier already, who focuses on everything between the 4 walls of their warehouses and really maxing out the inventory holding and throughput capacity of their facilities. So to start off with the US-based retailer, it's a large retailer. They've got over 2,000 stores, and they are actually focusing on how to get the most effective, the most effect, the most performance basically out of their promotional budget. And it goes further than promotion because it's not only their own promotional budget, it's also vendors, suppliers of them that have suggestions about how to promote their own product in their stores with what kind of displays or other ways of promoting the project or discounts. It's also about new product introductions. So promotions and new product introductions often go hand in hand, but not always. So it's also about timing of new product introductions, when to do that, what other product is it going to replace, or is it a new product that's added to the portfolio? And that brings us to the third aspect that they are working on, and that's product assortment over or within a category, but then for like 10 or 20 categories in total. And taking that whole problem, that whole situation, people who have worked in retail know that that's pretty complicated because there's a lot of options in timing about when to do a new product introduction. You can spend your budget only once. Are you going to do it this month on this product category, the next month on another category, next month or another, or are you spreading it out over multiple categories, thinning out your budget, but you know, making all your products attractive to a certain extent, and then doing that process not so much in an intuitive or gut feeling way, but really support that with fact-based analysis about looking at taking into account past performance of your promotional budget, other data that you get out of the market, syndicated data, in order to make really a fact-based, evidence-based decisions about promotions, new product introductions, and your total product assortment. And the application they have built actually does support all these different steps. It leverages their internal data, but also external data about developments in the market, about the competition, about historical view, future expectations. And it actually comes with suggestions about how to spend your money. So it does not restrict itself to just like a budgeting tool, but it actually gives advice as to this would be the best way to spend your money the next month, the next quarter, the next year, And this is the best way to allocate it over your different categories, over your different products. This is the timing. This is the intensity for the bigger stores, for the medium stores, for the smaller stores, and to keep track of that whole process. You do see some screens. I know they're a little bit blurred out because the information on the screens would reveal too much detail. Just know that there's a real application that they're working with, and they apply the platform right now across dozens of categories, helping merchandising and purchasing throughout the company. Then to an entirely different retailer. This one's in Europe with about 400 stores. This is in a fashion environment, so it's about clothing. Their challenge is that they have 3 categories of stores. Let's say the A categories are at the high streets, so the main street in Amsterdam or Berlin or Paris, and the C category stores are more in smaller towns or in outer areas. And they have fashion, obviously fashion categories, different lines, also like more generic, well I wouldn't say generic, but more regular clothing up to really high fashion clothing. And what they noticed was that obviously the high fashion clothing would go to the category A stores, and then and maybe a little bit to the B stores. And then at a certain point, because the category A stores are in much more fashion sensitive areas, there the attractiveness of the product would be very high, but also relatively short, because then people would like to move to another product. At that point, they like all retailers, you just start with your sale process, your discounting, and try to get rid of basically of the last products, and in order to make space for your new products. And what they found out is that in the B or maybe even in the C category stores, they could still sell these high fashion products for a couple of weeks longer for the high price. The overall turnover would be lower, the volume would be lower, but it would still run in those areas for some weeks more. And what they needed a analytics technology to do is to help them make the trade-off between investing in transport cost, moving products from one to another, versus the expected, you never know, but the expected additional revenue that they would get from selling it a few weeks longer for the maximum price. And then not just do the one-time analysis for that, but actually turn that into a tool that would support them like on a daily basis, maybe even more frequent, in making decisions about replenishment and about relocating product from one store to another. Because it's not just am I going to ship it, but to which other store am I going to transport it then? And is that store going to get the full batch of one category A store, or am I maybe going to combine several batches, or maybe first ship it back to the warehouse, create as full as possible, as complete as possible size curves, and then redistribute again. So a lot of trade-offs in there. They made an application, and actually a partner of us helped them make the application that on a daily basis gives them advice on replenishment of stores from the central DC. Twice per day, re-establish what the ideal inventory level, the target inventory level is of each and every store, and on an hourly basis give advice on stock movement between stores. The key idea behind this is that stock is something that's it's fluid, and it's one virtual inventory for the whole company. It's not something that's allocated to a store and then it's in a store and then a store needs to take care of it. The view is taken from a company perspective, and there where inventory product can generate the highest revenue, it will be allocated to that point. And this application is just finished, but the expectation based on previous analysis is that this will have a high impact on revenue, on lower depreciation, lower discounts, obviously the financial things. But what's actually really interesting, and that's not even on the slide, is that it will allow them much easier to keep their stores really fresh and up to date, to always have the most interesting new fashion items hanging close to the front door. Here are some screens about the application. There's forecasting in there, there's inventory optimization, there's optimization about getting the right size curve, and obviously in that forecasting process you can also adapt your demand manually. So it's also in that sense a demand planning system. The third and last example that I will give, it's an Asian store. This one's also about fashion. They've got about 1,000 stores in China, and they used to be a pure brick and mortar store, and then they started up with doing consumer deliveries. So they started up the e-commerce channel, and what they needed is because they ran into a situation that they were used to managing what you see on the left is the offline channel, so the brick and mortar store with, well, like an indication 900 orders per day with an average of like 75 pieces per order, which is a certain category of orders that also the warehouse management system was tuned to, and they were doing that excellently. But then they started phasing in the online retail network, and that grew in a matter of, well, a few years from 1,000 to 80,000 orders per day, with an average of only 1.3 pieces per order. So that's a totally different order profile to which the warehouse, and that has a physical aspect, but also the warehouse management system had struggled to dealing with both. Obviously, the best of breed warehouse management system could work well, could have been configured to deal with the online order profile or with the offline brick and mortar stores, but they needed to combine them both. And in order to do that, they just needed to add intelligence to the warehouse management system. And they built an AIMS application to do just that. And what they found out is the way they wanted to do that is that, for example, to the bigger orders, so for replenishing stores, for example, they have 800 orders in one batch or in one day. Then the question was, what are the best batches of 10 orders that one picker should go find and pick in the warehouse in one go? So what do the 80 ideal combinations, the 80 batches ideally look like? You can imagine you can just go from top to bottom the way the order they come in, and you can say, well, do mix up just the volume, make sure that you know, some orders are a bit bigger, some are a bit smaller, make a combination of that. But it also makes sense to look at the walking distance out of these 800 orders. You can probably identify combinations of orders that minimize the walking distance. So that makes the problem already more complicated, because you want to minimize walking distance and you still should be able to have the volume to such that you can combine it all into one car. And then find every day with the press of the button or every hour the best batch of 10 orders. And that in combination with the massive picking that needs to be done for the online retail network with, well, let's say also 800 orders, but then because the batches are much smaller, 60 batches, batches of 60 orders, and how do you, which 60 do you then combine in order to fill the total 800? And that in combination with the other orders, it's a pretty complicated problem. The way they did it is integrate the AIMS application with their best-of-breed warehouse management system, which luckily was open enough to do that. And actually the information that you can see here on the label, this is an actual label that's printed. The orange indicated information is the information that is calculated or optimized basically by the AIMS application, fed back into the best-of-breed warehouse management system. So it's really that specific that the optimization is done. And the effect of this is that the total picking path, so the total, basically the number of steps or the number of meters or yards that people in the warehouse walk for the same amount of orders is reduced by 15%. You can imagine what it does to the time and to the cost. But for them, most important was that they could increase the outbound capacity of that warehouse with another 15%. And you can imagine that that will have the effect of extending or delaying your decision to expand a new warehouse, maybe for another year or 2 years. And that has a huge financial impact. Well, that's the benefit they had of that. With that, I would like to conclude the 3 examples and summarize into 4 key recommendations. And the first one is that you've seen now 3 different opportunities to improve your performance using advanced analytics or modeling and optimization. And it's not limited to these 3. You could pick 3 other retailers and they do 3 other things that for them have an equally high impact as the 3 things I just explained for these retailers. And it's really interesting for yourself to just do the exercise. Where would, for me, be the highest impact of making smarter decisions, really smarter decisions on a daily basis? And do that while thinking out of the box. Not within the confines of, oh, I need a better warehouse management system, or oh, I need a better order management system. Make the scope wider. That's typically what these clients do. They don't just think from within the walls of the store and then, oh, how can I optimize? Make the scope wider, dare to do that, and then think, well, if we would do that, would it be possible to, well, and then make the problem bigger? It probably is possible. And by increasing the scope, you seriously increase your chance of making better, smarter decisions and being more effective. And an interesting point as well is we see more and more companies thinking and considering or actually making the step to start making these kind of applications themselves. The last client I explained made the application totally themselves. The first application designed it themselves, the first client, but had it built by a third party, external party. And the middle client just had the idea and had an implementation partner build the whole application. There's various ways of growing into building your own capability to reap the benefits of supply chain analytics. And it's worthwhile to consider that, to becoming better in that yourself. And we're more than happy to help you with that. About a month ago, we had a first webinar on setting up your own supply chain center of excellence, analytics center of excellence, and what that could look like. And April 19, we will do a follow-up on that where we can walk you through tools and templates that will actually help you get started and moving forward on your own trail of supply chain analytics. I wish you fun and good luck with that. And now I go over to Laura.
Great. Thank you, Marcel. So hopefully today's topic provided some interesting examples and gave you some things to think about. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, and we hope that you enjoyed the information presented. A big thank you to Marcel for a very informative webcast. Just wanted to let everyone know that we're going to be sending out a link to the video within the next couple days, so be on the lookout for that email. And if you have any questions for Marcel that pop into your head after this webinar, please feel free to reach out to him directly. We've got his email on this slide, and you'll also have it on the slides that we mail out. So if something comes up, just send him an email. He'll be happy to help. You could also go to the AIMS website in the resources section, and you can get some of the case studies that we've spoken about today. There's also some white papers and some previous webinars that we've had that you could watch on demand when you have some additional time. Right after this webinar, you're going to see a survey pop up with a few questions, so please take just a minute or two to just provide us with some feedback about this webinar. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.